course, I'm going to start you off easy. Can I have you say and spell your name?
My name is Pat Kerrigan, Kerrigan.
And what is a title that you have within the community, either as an executive director or at large?
Executive Director of the Oak Hill Collaborative. I still get referred to as judge by many people, especially within the city, because I used to be a judge of the Youngstown Municipal Court, but I'm an executive director now.
Yeah. How long were you a judge?
10 years. I presided over a court with two other judges that we handled all the traffic cases that came through the city, all the minor civil cases up to 25,000, but a lot of things like garnishments and wage attachments and things like that. And then our biggest load was for misdemeanor criminal cases. We also handled felony criminal cases, but they would tend to either get reduced at our court or sent over to the grand jury and then to the common police court. So we had a great volume of literally thousands of misdemeanors every year. Different people do it different ways, and I like to think that I did it pretty well because I tried to consider all of the factors in a defendant's situation. Sometimes you can't do that because you're making quick decisions right on the spot, just the overwhelming number of cases. So many people would come in, they plead no contest, and what do you have? You have maybe their record, you have a police report, there might be an officer. In many cases, there isn't even a victim because there wasn't set for trial, it was just set for an arraignment. So you take into account whatever information you can, but generally, if you could, you would want to know the record, you would want to know what the recommendations of your probation department are. And the record means not only just what they're convicted of, what their punishment has been, have they successfully served on probation or whatever. And so many of the cases that you would get in the court, you have to look into the circumstances of the case itself. I feel that was the most important thing. Because you could look at a record for one person versus record for another. This one could be a whole lot worse, but really they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're poor, they're hanging with the wrong people, they're getting a lot of stupid stuff. This person may have a good record, they had a good lawyer, they have good excuses, they have good family, get them out of trouble, but yet they're much worse than this person. You have to be able to take in all those considerations. One of the things, just how people dress, you have to be careful not to say, well, that person doesn't dress well, and this one does, and this one's apologetic, and this one's almost defiant. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of cultural differences. The person there may be, African American in a white courtroom with a white judge, bailiff, prosecutors, defense lawyers, no friends. This one may be white with his families all there, and high-priced lawyers, and people know people, and it's a whole different circumstance. So he may be very apologetic. Well, the other kid may be defensive. So you have to be able to see all the circumstances surrounding people and their backgrounds to make a sentence.
Overall, when you were a judge, so pre-incarceration, would you say that systemically or systematically either or, was your viewpoint on the incarceration system more positive, negative, beneficial to individuals?
Well, I generally thought that it was negative. I mean, I had to do it. That was my job. And certainly there were some cases where people had to be punished. But I didn't always feel that punishment was just a straight up jail sentence. There weren't very many people I just said, you get the max and get out of my face kind of thing. It was, trying to tailor things. So I was pretty well known for creative sentencings. I mean, I often had sent people to drug and alcohol rehab. I was a big proponent of that. I would sentence someone to learn how to read. Give them 2 years probation and say, okay, I want you to come back and show me you can read something. That was the sentence because they couldn't read. They weren't having any success in life the way they were going. And so maybe if they did something, somebody put some discipline on them, that would be better than just sitting in a cold, dirty, dank jail. So, I mean, I wasn't a big fan of jail. I mean, I did it, and There were times. And it was funny, we had like 3 judges in the court. One judge didn't put anybody in jail ever. I think that just enabled people that, I mean, they were spoiled. They had no consequences for what they did. And the other judge put everybody in jail for as long as he could. Well, that didn't, anyway, so I'm like, I mean, there were many times where, I wasn't even a big fan of records, I mean, I used to not infrequently get a young, often, usually, African-American kid in front of me that, he's sitting there by himself, he doesn't have any support, there's no family, just a poor soul, and I would literally be yelling at him and grabbing his papers, and the papers would go flying. My bed was down in front of me. And when the papers would go flying, he'd go, okay, this guy's not guilty. Because I would take a piece out of that guy. Don't you ever come back here. I didn't need to have a record, that didn't help me either, So it was a wide variety. You had to be creative. You had to try to know the circumstances of what happened. And I think I was a good judge of character, and that was the thing that you needed the most.
Pat Kerrigan says he's ready to pay for his crime. It took a while, but he's finally come to terms with what he did.
I was very bitter about it. I'm trying to deal with that and not have the resentment that I had. I think I did wrong, and I deserve to be punished to some extent. I was incarcerated for kind of a bunch of little things. I think anybody that goes through life, they can find something on you, and honestly, that's what it was. I hate to sound like I didn't do anything, because I'm sure it did, but this was one of those situations that other people were getting in trouble. And the FBI was saying to them, we will let you out of trouble if you give us Kerrigan. But what happens is you get a bunch of things like that you're facing an overwhelming task with dealing with the federal government. The federal government wins 90% of their cases, and one of the reasons they do is they just overwhelm you. And if I had fought the cases, and they also penalize you for going to trial. So I would have done over 8 years in prison if I was convicted, because there was just enough little things that they added up. And every time you do, now all of a sudden the penalty doesn't just increase, it expands exponentially. And so I just felt I couldn't do it, and it would have cost me in those days. This was in 1988. It would have cost me $150,000 to go to court. Well, I went bankrupt my family. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any illegal money, but I didn't have any family money. It wasn't, huge bank accounts anywhere. Bankrupt my family, and then spend 8 years in prison if I lose. That's just, unfathomable. So they have you between a rock and a hard place. And that often happens, not just with high-profile people like me being a judge, but with others as well. And a couple of cases like that. So, and then once you do a couple, then everybody says, oh, well, they're getting Kerrigan anyway, so dump on them. So we got a bunch of people that were really lying. But again, there were things that I did that I shouldn't have done. I'm not proud of it. And I was reckless at the time. I was undiagnosed bipolar manic depressive, which is, again, it's a condition that people have that often goes unrecognized in court, Rather than fight it, I decided to plead and, do my time and get on with my life. There were a couple of charges. The main charge, which I totally resent, is they called it extortion. And that's the black letter paragraph heading is called extortion. But all that meant to me, that sounds like, well, I go to you and say, you pay me, or I'm going to put you in jail, I'm going to punch you, I'm going to burn your place down, or whatever. No, what they were saying was that I accepted benefits under the color of law. So that can apply to anybody doing anything. They said that I took this trip to Florida because I was a judge and I could help them out. Well, let's assume even that's correct. That's not extortion. There's no force. There's no threat of force. That was not my idea. But that's what it was called. And there was not any bribery. It was just this extortion charge. There was also a charge of mishandling of property. But again, I could go on and on. I'd taken a gun from the police evidence room. Other judges and other people, they just took them, or they signed them out, or they snuck them out, or they confiscated them. I went to the police chief and said, I have security concerns. Everybody's threatening me. We have no security in court, no security at home. Can I get a gun? And they were going to destroy the gun anyway. They were going to melt it down, so it had no value. And the chief said, yeah, here. And as a matter of fact, he got a police officer to give me training, in the police range. So it was like, what's wrong with that? I signed out big bold letter. Here's my name. It wasn't anything, no subterfuge involved. Well, they charged me for, misusing property. I'm like, well, it had no value, and I had approval. And so I served almost 20 months, 19 months, plus a 6-month halfway house. So I spent 25 months.
Okay. Before you got transferred to the Morgantown Rehabilitation, where were you?
That was a scary place. I was in the Rochester facility of the Bureau of Prisons. And that place was kind of a mental and physical health facility, as well as a real high security environment. But it was mainly because of anybody that had health issues that went there. We had close proximity to the Mayo Clinic. So some people had more serious problems than others, But it was one of those places with concertina wire, we wonder, why are there barbed wire across the top? Well, that's so the helicopters will come in and it didn't take inmates out. And like, okay, and had armed guards. But they had right around the corner. It was around the corner, but I could see 50 yards, less than 50 yards on the end of this one wing. There was the blind Ayatollah that was the original Trade Center bombing in the parking deck there before the ultimate one. So this was like maybe in 1996 or something when that happened. When that happened, he was in prison and he was under super deep security. But those were the kind of people who were there. Yeah, it was kind of crazy place. I went years being misdiagnosed. And then I went into the prison system, and the guy looked at me and he did a test. And in the Mayo Clinic area, well, you don't have depression, you're bipolar. He put me on medication, and that was in 1998. I'm on that same medication to this day.
Good to be here.
How you feeling?
Members of the local news media were among the first to greet Pat Kerrigan as he arrived at Community Corrections. He's beginning the next phase of his federal sentence, and he tells us he is feeling good.
Glad that part of it's over. Looking forward to trying to get on with the rest of my sentence and the rest of my life.
What's the first thing you're going to do now that you're here?
Do whatever he tells me to do.
When I got to Morgantown, it was interesting because I got there and nobody knew me, anywhere else, so it wasn't a big issue. But I actually get on the bus to go to Morgantown, and there's some guy there from Youngstown. Hey, Judge, how you doing? And he's like a killer. And I'm like, oh, Mario. But by the time I got to the place, I process and I get in my uniform and I go back to my room and they tell me where to go. And there's half a dozen young kids of color, hey, Judge, you remember us? Remember me? Oh, man. Hey, Judge, that's not a good sign. One kid says, I'll never forget, Eric. Eric looks at me and says, I'm Eric. He says, you put me in jail for 6 months. Another guy, Donald something or other, gave me 2 years. He wasn't looking real happy. Then the third guy goes, hey, Judge, Jose, or Ahmed, and he was Arab American. Says, you didn't put me in jail, but you put my cousin in jail. And then Jose says, and so all of a sudden I'm realizing these are my fanboys. I mean, these guys were very cool about it. And they said, Judge, you were a good judge, you were a good guy. And nobody's had any problem with you. You weren't out to get anybody. We got your back. So that was quite a relief at that point, you know. But the problems I had obviously were the complete lack of access to things that I could do and take advantage of. I mean, I have a singular education and experience in the criminal justice field. ABD for my PhD, I have a master's degree in criminal justice, a law degree. I spent 10 years as a practicing lawyer defending cases and prosecuting cases part-time. 10 years as a municipal court judge. And I worked as a law clerk, a law student, wrote briefs. I spent a few years after I got out working for lawyers and doing stuff there. So, and then my teaching, I taught at Youngstown State University for 10 years while I was a judge. I taught 20 classes there, 25. But when I tried to get a job, they wouldn't even give me an interview. I mean, YSU was the worst, I met every qualification. I doubled the qualifications that they were asking for, literally. And I was a great teacher, because I had done it. I had these tremendous teaching reviews. They wouldn't even interview me. I had one job down in Dayton that did everything right. Did the teaching exam perfectly. It was exactly what they wanted. They loved me. It was Wright State branch campus. They sent it to the main thing, and all they know is, oh, he's got a record, we're not going to have. So I couldn't find a job, and it was miserable. And that was the hardest part, I mean, I was always going to find a job of some sort, and I ended up getting a job with the company, and I became his vice president. But yeah, the biggest problem was the inability to get a job that reasonably lined up with the skills that I had. And I made a very big mistake, and I have my legal counsel to blame, who happened to be my uncle, who thought I had done a very bad thing and I should never be a lawyer again. And he loved me, but he had certain standards, and he just felt that, no question, I should resign my license while being investigated, which is what I did. Bad advice. Anybody out there listening, if you're in that, say, don't resign your license ever, because you can never, ever, ever get it back. That's permanent. People that get disbarred get their licenses back all the time. I didn't know that, and he didn't advise me, and he didn't counsel me to do that. So, his idea was, spare a big hearing and spare the publicity and spare. We could have done all this with just letting them enter a disbarment notice against me, and then I could have gone in 5 years and got my license back. But I didn't. I resigned it, and that had permanent effect. So, and I did a TED Talk, and there's one thing I want you to learn from that TED Talk is I'm white, I live in America, I've got a family, I've got an education, I've got people that care about me and know me at heart. Life is still so much better than it is for so many people. I'll just make up a number, but I used to say, I was in the top 10% of people in the world, and that's not an exaggeration. Maybe that may even be understated, but in terms of income and education and prestige and comfort level, and I think all the poor people in the world, maybe in the top 5%. So I lose my license, I go to prison, I get out, I have a lot less money than I wanted, I lost less income. So I'm in the top 20% of people in the world. I'm still blessed. So I just try to maintain that attitude all